She was a powerhouse of a person. She was energy.
Everyone's friend.
She had a smile. She could walk into a room and light it up.
Dannielle wanted love.
It was the first boyfriend we had ever met.
They just seemed to click.
But after meeting on a dating app, this coward took her life. Was this a murder waiting to happen?
I believe so.
Coming up on 60 Minutes, Ashley Gaddie was a serial domestic violence offender. 5 women had taken out apprehended violence orders against him. The shameful issue gripping Australia.
If he'd been not out on bail, Danni would be alive today.
Well, welcome to the Extra Minutes podcast. I'm Tara Brown from 60 Minutes, and my lovely colleague, Amelia Adams, is here with us to talk about a very disturbing and very tragic story.
It was very tragic. I still get chills watching that, and as you know, we watch our own stories sometimes dozens of times before they get to air, but this was really something very unique. Dannielle Finlay-Jones was 31 years old. She was like any 31-year-old. She was very social and very popular and really on the cusp, I think, of almost a new chapter. She just started a new job, but she was looking for love.
She was looking for love.
Yeah. And
she was looking in the places we increasingly look.
Well, that's right. In fact, I think it was 3 million Australians last year went on a dating app. So whether it's Tinder or Bumble or... I've actually never been one, so I couldn't tell you more of them. But she chose to go on Bumble, which is something that, as you say, so many people do. And she matched with a 33-year-old man, a tradie from Sydney's West by the name of Ashley Gaddie. And she matched with him and they pretty quickly clicked. They went on 2 dates in the first week. And then she was actually ready to bring him out with her friends.
And introduced him to family even. And he was saying all the right things, I understand from your story, you know, that he wanted a committed relationship, that he wanted children.
He was. Actually, Danni's mum met him very briefly the day Dannielle was murdered. Danni's mum's name is Jackie. She's such a beautiful, beautiful woman, and she had never spoken publicly before about her daughter's death or her daughter's case until she spoke with us for 60 Minutes. So I really got the sense that Jackie... she'd almost put her grief on hold. In fact, she says that.
Yep. Because
she'd been so focused on the court case, which we'll get to. So she's in this sort of fresh grief almost now.
How was that to deal with? Because that's quite confronting.
It was. And, you know, as news reporters, which I was in news for 20 years, we would often have to knock on the door of people's homes who someone had died in a car accident or whatever it might be. And you often do get that very raw grief. Where the person, the family member or the partner hasn't quite processed it themselves. Danni was murdered in December 2022 and her mother, Jackie, and her brother Blake, they were there together, still refer to her as though she's alive. Oh, she's this, she lights up the room, she loves her football. You know, they're not yet talking about her in the past tense.
They can't quite believe that she's gone?
They can't quite believe it because of the way she was murdered. And to your point, Jackie, very briefly, one Saturday morning in December, her daughter comes past to drop off a car with her new boyfriend. Oh, Mum, this is Ashley, as you do. Mm-hmm. She said she didn't notice anything sort of untoward about him or dodgy or... She said, oh, he, you know, seemed fine, just said okay, you know, nice to meet you. And then that evening, Dannielle took Ashley Gaddie along to a Christmas drinks get-together with her friends. So that turned out to be the last time, not only the first time Jackie met Ashley Gaddie, her daughter's murderer, but the last time she would see her daughter alive.
Oh, it's so sad, isn't it? I mean, the red flags that people talk about, Mum didn't see them in that very brief meeting, but that night, around drinks, were friends worried?
There were, and in fact, speaking to a number of her friends in the last few weeks, there was something that happened on the second date as well, and we didn't include that in the story that you've seen because it was quite nuanced and difficult to explain. There was a red flag on the second date when he was just a bit aggressive in public. But on that third date, when she took him along to Christmas drinks. They were playing a drinking game. It was one of those card games, you know, never would I ever. We've probably all played it. I've played it. And her question was, have you ever had a one-night stand? And she said yes. And the group of friends say that he went off. He said, oh, you've lied to me. And they went into the corner and had a little argument. Nothing physical, but just enough that her friends were like, well, hang on a second, who's this new bloke? They're arguing. But that said, apparently I'm told it was quickly resolved and they were drinking and sort of back cuddling, and by the end of the night, this new couple were resolved. And we spoke to her best friend, Taylor, you saw in the story, and she said, all seemed well, and so she actually took them home to her house because it was closer, and that's where they stayed the night.
I know. We'll get onto that in a moment. I think that's just so awful. But what did Taylor and her other friends, Mum and her brother, say about Danni's personality and her character? How would she have reacted to being berated about this drinking game and the information she revealed? Would she have stood for that?
No. Apparently she was pretty confident, described as an extrovert, stood up for herself. And they all said that she would have said, mate, this isn't on. And in fact, her friends that are in the pub say, she sort of went, well, hang on a second. And she gave it back to him. They had quite a fiery argument. And then she said, right, this is silly. Let's get over this. Let's resolve it. So it seems that she was quite a confident young woman, happy to stand up for herself. And in fact, her best friend Taylor told me that she felt in Ashley Gaddie she'd met someone who was a bit of a challenge, almost that she'd met her match, and that maybe was a little bit different to other guys she dated and a little bit, exciting as well. Someone who was a bit dominant and a bit masculine and, they had that sort of fire, I guess, in their chemistry.
But no one could guess how dominating, perhaps.
No, indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
So take us to Taylor's home that night. That again, as I say, that gives me chills.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine, and Taylor is an extraordinary young woman to be able to recount it. And as I say, this was the first time as well that she's spoken to the media or publicly, and she was pretty shaken up. But, they went home, they put on some little pies and sausage rolls as you do at midnight after a night drinking. And then she took them to her spare room. Here you go, good night. And they all went to bed. In the night, Taylor says her partner woke her and said, did you hear a funny noise? And she heard some sort of noise which she said she thought was sort of maybe sounded a bit like sex or something sexual. So they kind of had a giggle about it, as you would, and went back to sleep. It didn't sound violent. There was no screaming at all, nothing threatening, but they heard something. So the next morning they went about their business and just thought, Danni and Ashley are sleeping off their hangovers until about 2 p.m. when they thought, oh, we need to get into the spare room now. And a bit odd they hadn't surfaced.
Yes.
Which is when Taylor went to wake them and walked into a scene that she just, is completely haunted by.
Of course. She'd be haunted by so much.
Yeah, and obviously there are so many what ifs. What if I'd gone in the night? What if I'd gone in earlier? But the truth is, what Ashley Gaddie had done to Danni, which her family tell me is straddle her, strangle her and suffocate her. That was the official cause of death on her death certificate. She would have been completely overpowered. There was nothing anyone could have done to stop him, and the family know that. So that's what Taylor walked in to see the next day. Her best friend, very badly beaten and bloodied and strangled. And Ashley Gaddie was nowhere to be seen. So he actually had fled, they believe, out the window, and he was on the run, and Taylor was left to manage this horrendous situation.
I can't even imagine how she copes today, let alone that morning or that afternoon, 2 o'clock or so, when she discovered her best friend's body. She must have also feared that he might still be in the house, that he was a threat.
She did. She said she was running around, opening every door and, trying to figure out exactly that, where he was, why he'd done that, what had happened. She subsequently had to sell that house. She said she couldn't. She was so traumatised and really actually shut off from society for quite some time. So she's had a very, very rough time. But I think, the big twist for the family really was when he was arrested.
Well, I was going to ask you, with the arrest of him, what did that reveal about who he really was?
Well, he had an extraordinary violent history. And, you can put on your dating app bio all sorts of things that you might like to do and hobbies and things about yourself. But what he hadn't put was that he had a string of AVOs against him, five from different women, dating back to 2016.
Mm-hmm.
He had been convicted of assaulting an ex-girlfriend, actually not just assault, choking and stalking.
Yep.
And he'd been given a community corrections, basically community service.
Yep.
So he's halfway through a 2-year community service sentence when he met Danni. In that previous 6 months, he'd assaulted another woman. So he's out on bail. He's got this list of convictions and the fresh assault charge when he met her and murdered her. And so that extra shock to the family was Jackie, Danni's mum, said when she found out, she just went numb, and then she was just screaming, and she just couldn't believe that he could be free to reoffend.
Which brings into question the whole bail. Why was he out on bail?
Well, indeed, and it was a magistrate in New South Wales who had deemed him low risk of reoffending. And look, it's difficult for us to know what goes into, the court process and those decisions on any given day. Obviously, the family would like to see those bail laws tightened and are fully supportive of the New South Wales government's review.
But that speaks to the bigger issue, doesn't it, of domestic violence on a national scale here, that, where is it falling down? Because you do have police responding to women complaining, to families complaining, but then what happens? What happens next?
Well, that's right, and I put that to the New South Wales Police Commissioner, as you would have seen, and it's incredibly frustrating for her and for police when they do respond and they do actually, like in Gaddy's case, arrest and charge offenders, and then the courts let them out and they find themselves re-arresting them, in some cases for murder. So in that sense, the onus is on the courts. There's a whole lot of issues around AVOs as well, as to whether or not they are strongly enough. If they are policed strongly enough and enforced strongly enough, that can come down to resourcing. But ultimately, that's a piece of paper. 5 AVOs that he had out against him wouldn't stop him going on a date, and nor should they in most cases. And this is, I think, what everyone is grappling with, is that every case is so unique and so different. And so the solutions are never going to be a one-size-fits-all.
No, but do we have options?
We do.
Are there solutions that we should be putting into place that may not make it perfect, but make it better?
And Taylor, Danni's best friend, put it very simply, and I thought very well. She said, I just want to know the criteria. Why is the criteria so low? If someone's got this, and this, can't the court look at that all at once, as opposed to, that was a separate case, we can't possibly take that into account? And can't they say, look, this could be a problem? Is there another option? We can't lock everyone up. That leads to other issues in terms of incarceration rates, but could there be a reform program or some sort of anger management program? Another step between, jail and out on bail, maybe something could go wrong again.
Is it the law, aspects of actual law that cripple us in being able to act, or is it about attitude? Is it about not being taken seriously enough?
I think it's a bit of both. I think there's things in the courts that they have to, there's the question at the moment as to whether there should be a presumption against bail for domestic violence offenders or people accused of domestic violence. So there's that legal argument. Should you have to prove that you are going to reoffend, and how do you do that? I'm not a legal expert. But certainly attitudes is a problem as well. Are women being taken at face value when they make these accusations? And, Danni's family say it wasn't just Danni that was let down here by our criminal justice system. It was his other victims as well. Because Ashley Gaddie has got ex-girlfriends, and we've spoken to several of them, not on camera, because they've got serious fears for their own safety.
Yes.
And they're victims too, because they did go to authorities and they did say, he's choked me, he's done this, I'm worried he's going to hurt another woman. And they were right.
What a way to be proven right.
Well, indeed.
Then the other twist in your story, which I think must leave Danni's family feeling so hollow, is justice.
Yeah.
No justice.
And they put so much faith in the court process. As I said earlier, they almost had put their grieving on hold because they thought, right, you know, they're following, and you and I know what it's like. The court processes can be very hard to follow when you're not in that world, you know. So they're going to court, they're following the this and the delay and the committal and whatnot, and they had so much hope that he would be either pleading guilty, found guilty. They were thinking about his sentence. They wanted him to be punished, have consequences, face justice, and fair enough. And they also really wanted the opportunity to stand in court and give their victim impact statement and look him in the eye and say, this is what you've taken from the world. And then last month, Ashley Gaddie decided he would make the decision himself, and he killed himself in jail. So that's been another huge blow. And Jackie said again when she got that phone call, it was almost like the day that Danni had died again. And she realised that her grieving process had been completely on hold, and now that he's dead, she's sort of focused again on, my God, my daughter's not here. This massive sort of double injustice in a way.
Yes, because there's nobody, I mean, there's somebody to be angry at, but there is no punishment, as you say. He's gone.
No, and I think now they're really shifting their energy into remembering Danni and grieving. One of the lovely things we did with them was visit a memorial garden. And it, you know, it's all planted in purple, the colour for domestic violence advocacy. There's a little concrete football because she was a team captain at her football club, and they were really sort of chatting about her and chatting to her as well. It was very lovely. So that's a lovely place for them and other people to reflect and remember her. But they've also become quite vocal, as we often hear in these cases in the advocacy space. Yeah, domestic violence rallies and walks and sharing their story, because ultimately, like everyone, they don't want Danni just to be another statistic.
No, I was going to say, what do they want Danni's legacy to be?
Well, they want change. They don't want it to happen to another woman. And that number of women being killed by current or former partners just keeps on rising. So they're hopeful that by adding their story, Danni's story, and their calls for change, that will have an impact. Not only the bail laws that they'd like to see strengthened, but they're really strong on, understandably, how dating apps are policed or not policed. So Jackie really wants to see police checks on dating apps, which sounds like a great idea. And I put this to the police commissioner, and she said it's a great idea. That she said they're all the commissioners around the country are talking about it. It would take a lot of resources, obviously, and time, but geez, it'd be worth it. I mean, and I'm not suggesting this is how it would work, but imagine if you match with someone and then it says, 5 AVOs out on bail. You're not going to go on a date with them, eh?
He's not going to get any dates, that guy.
I mean, isn't it sad that we're at a point where we have to think like that?
We haven't. I mean, it is terribly sad, but it's the only way to protect, isn't it? What about the issue of, like in South Australia, having violent offenders electronically tagged, basically followed? Yeah.
I mean, I spoke to the family again yesterday, and they're basically throwing their weight behind any changes. The South Australian model, I think, is a very... radical is too strong a word, but that's sort of one, it's almost an extreme idea. I mean, I think it's great. You can see there's going to be backlash against it as well. Would that have saved Danni's life? Probably. So, you know, any sort of counter measure that would protect women, Danni's family are throwing all of their support behind any sort of domestic violence, you know, package. And I know that the New South Wales government are about to announce another one in the next couple of days. They're fully supportive of, but their main calls are that if it all falls down in the bail court, then, you know, there's no safety net. Yeah.
Do they feel encouraged in any way by the federal government's response?
Again, yes and no. They said, look, we're very pleased to hear the conversation. You know, to have the Prime Minister taking it seriously and talking to all the commissioners and standing up and allocating money. The new package, which actually isn't a new package at all, $5,000 payments wouldn't have helped Danni because that's for rehousing and helping people leave, but that's they're very happy to hear that for other domestic violence victims. But they're very much of the mind that more needs to be done in the court.
That's a long-term change.
It is. And I think to change, I mean, we saw it in Victoria after Jill Marmer's murder. It's a huge overhaul.
But we were arguing back then about bail.
Yeah.
We're arguing about bail again today. I mean...
Yeah, and how much longer does it go on?
Exactly. Lots of lives lost in between these two women. It's so tragic.
Yeah, so you can only hope that this tragic, I guess, recent spate of murders and stories coming to light, you know, gives the government the momentum and the impetus to really make some drastic changes.
And on so many different levels, because, you know, we've got, you know, in-person violence, we've got online intimidation and harassment. I mean, there are lots of different areas where these opportunities arise that need to kind of be cut off somehow.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, the Prime Minister was focused quite a lot on the online side of it this week, and I think the education of young men is a key issue and what they're viewing and what they're taking in. Blake, Danni's brother, mentioned to me that he said he's seen a growing disrespect towards women, and he said that Ashley Gaddie, you know, listened to some of those really right-wing kind of extreme masculine podcasts. He mentioned Andrew Tate. Those sorts of influences, I think, have gained momentum.
So looking at why there's such a toxic attitude towards women is key to this?
Yeah, absolutely. Where's it coming from? How young is it starting? And then how do you counteract that? How do you manage it? How do you educate? Because it does feel like we've gone backwards in a way.
Well, when you consider police resources put into fighting this, I think the Commissioner of New South Wales Police was saying 60 to 75% of time for general duty officers is spent on attending domestic violence cases, and that would be mirrored around the country. That's just New South Wales. So.
Yeah. I mean, if you stop and think about that as a statistic, 60 to 75% of our police time and resources, that's extraordinary. I mean, I guess we're living in a pretty low crime era at the moment, but still, that's a lot of police time that's dedicated to those sort of call-outs and, you know, that they're stretched as it is.
Yeah, it's a sign things are not getting better, despite how long we've been talking about it.
Yeah.
Just finally, how would you say that Danni's tragedy reflects on the national crisis? Is this a microcosm of what is happening around the country?
I think it is, and I think that's why the story had such an impact, certainly on me and the crew as we were filming it, because it's just so relatable. She's just such a normal, happy, you know, school teacher, loved her football, loved having a drink and a dance with her mates, jumped online to see if she could find love. There's nothing extraordinary about her story, except that the way that, you know, she died. It's such a normal kind of Australian snapshot of how we look for love and you're just going out on a couple of dates. And the way that she was murdered, and any murder is horrendous, obviously, and then to find out his background, I think is, you know, you can't imagine how her family and friends will really ever get over that. But I think seeing some sort of change or some sort of hope that this is not just going to keep repeating as it has been, that's certainly what they're clinging to. But as you say, that's, you know, could be quite a long-term change, and certainly in the court system.
Yeah, as somebody who clearly has been deeply affected by this story, I guess you want people to sit up and take notice. You don't want this just to be another death, another statistic like Danni's family has expressed, do you?
No. I mean, I think people
will make a difference.
I hope so. I think people will be furious. I think they'll be outraged. I think they'll be disgusted. And there's no... And everyone I've spoken to in relation to this story and connected to it, you cannot understand how a magistrate could say you're a low risk of reoffending when you've just been convicted of choking and stalking. So maybe that's it. Maybe the bar needs to be, you know, so much higher. And again, I'm not an expert in the legal process. I've sat in a lot of those bail courts, sadly, in my time as a journalist, and murders and DV and whatnot. But you cannot imagine how a man like Ashley Gaddie was not given a custodial sentence. It is infuriating, it is disgusting, it is wrong, and it was a murder waiting to happen.
It raises the question, what does he have to do to not get bail?
Right. And maybe that's a question the governments, the courts need to look at.
Yeah. Well, thank you. This is such a lovely and rare opportunity to pick your brains.
It is. I've always wanted to be interviewed by Tara Brown.
Sure.
Not.
Just a chat.
Just a lighthearted topic too.
It's such a lighthearted
Yeah.
topic. So thank you very much for watching and listening.